So, hello all. So, in today's session, we will be discussing how we can create a promise of our own, okay, and how we can even combine it with our traditional way of sending request, which is request, okay. So, see, guys, in the previous session, we actually saw that how can we handle promises using then and catch, right? But now it's finally time to learn how can we create a promise of our own. See. Basically, there are two ways of creating a promise. Either you can actually store a promise in a variable, or it can actually be returned by a function, right? You can choose any of the way, but one of the most popular way is by creating a function which returns a promise. Okay, so we're going to be doing the same as well. We will be returning a promise by a function. Okay, all right. So let's go functions uh, make promise. Okay, so this function I'm naming make promise. Now, this function will return a new promise. Okay, so this promise class we have here, you need to provide a callback function. Again, it can be an arrow or an anonymous function. And this callback function gets access to two parameters, which is resolve and reject. See, inside of this callback function you can do whatever stuff you want to do. And in the end, you have to decide when to resolve and when to reject. Okay. So I'll give you a small example. Here, I'll create a variable. Okay. Let age is equals to, and then using the prompt. Okay. I'll also convert that into an integer. So prompt and enter your age. That's what we're going to be asking from the user. And once we have the age, see, I don't want to do it immediately. Promises are created for something which takes some time to happen, right? So, as you all know, that we have a special function in JavaScript, set timeout, which can actually call a function, or you can say run a function for us after the time interval we provide. So maybe let's say I want to run this function after 5 seconds, right? And inside of this function, I don't want to do a lot of things. I just want to check that if the age is more than or equals to 18, then hey, I want to give you like a response back, not just console. Instead, I will resolve here because this is what success means for me here, right? When you're eligible. Hmm. So eligible, right? And in case if the request actually fails, then in the else, I want to reject. Okay. And in the reject, we have to provide a reason, right? So here I can say like, not eligible, and that's it. Okay, this is my function. I want to do like some basic things here only. That is why I'm putting a simple example that if your age is 18 or more, then that means success to me. So I'm going to resolve and say eligible. And if that's not the case, then it's rejected and you're not eligible, right? Now, the way of handling remains the same. When you call the make promise function, again, you're returning a promise, right? And when a promise is returned, you have to use then and catch to handle it. Again, you have to create a callback function in here as well as catch. And here I do expect some data, and here I expect some error. Okay, so I can console.log the data given to me, also the error if there is any. Okay, so if I save it, and oh, maybe I forgot to link the file. Yeah, so it should be promise.js. And if I go back, see, it's asking for the age. So yeah, the age is 23 maybe. And it will take 5 seconds to run the function and then it says eligible, right? Because 23 is more than or equals to 18. But if I run it again and if I provide a smaller number, then after 5 seconds, it will simply say not eligible. Boom, not eligible, right? So that is how you can create a very simple promise of your own. But obviously, that's not what we're going to be doing actually in real life, right? So for an example, let me just comment this out. I actually want to create a function which can send request for me. Hmm. And it returns a promise back so that when the promise resolve, you have the data, and if there is any error, you get the error back. Okay. All right. So let's create a function and let's call it send request. Okay. This is the function. And this function also returns a promise back. And here again, as above, you get the access to resolve and reject, right? And inside of it, I want to make a request. Okay. Oh, not an actual request, basically the request object from XMLHttpRequest, request, right? So request is equals to new XMLHttpRequest request and done. Then the request have a open function. Okay. There I'll provide, I want to send a get request to the URL which will be provided as a parameter later. Right? We haven't stated the parameter yet, but yeah, I'll expect the URL as a parameter and it will send the request to that URL. Also, the request will then be sent. And in the request tutorial, you also saw that how you can handle a request, right? So once open and send function is done making, then you can again create a basically you can apply a event listener to your request, which will listen to an event called ready state change. And when this event happens, you want to run this callback function in here. And here, I'll simply check that if the request dot status is 200, which means if the request is successful, and if the request is completed, and that will do by checking for the ready state. And if the value of it is 4, it means the request is completed as well. So here I want to resolve and I want to send the data. Okay. But this data I don't want to send as a string. That is why I'm using the JSON.parse function, inside of which I will pass the request.response text. Okay. Now, what if the request fails, right? If the XML HTTP request fails, then in that case, you have to check for two things, that if the status is not 200 and the request is completed. So here I'll provide the same condition but with a slight twist, which is not 200, right? So here we are checking that if the request is completed but not successful, then in that case I want to reject. And the reason, uh, I'm not going to provide a valid reason. I'm simply going to say failed to fetch and done. Okay. Again, once you're done creating the function, try to run it. Use the send request function, provide the URL to which you want to send the request. Uh, so we're going to be sending the request to the same JSON placeholder. Okay. And yeah. But in order to handle it again, because the send request is actually giving you a promise back. Let me check. Is it returning a promise or not? Uh-huh. Maybe we're making a mistake. Okay. Let's run and test it. All right. So yeah. Oh, my bad. See, I told you guys I forgot something, and it's the new keyword, right? Yeah. So now we're done. Okay. And then now you can see it returns a promise. Okay. So in order to handle this promise, you have to use again the then and catch function. Okay. This one expects error. So if there is any error, console.log that error. And the above one expects some data. Okay, you can call it data, you can call it result, whatever you want to call it, you can. I'm going to be calling it data. Okay, so here we go. See, we are able to get the to-do list data back. So that is how you can create your own promise, and you can also mimic the fetch API somewhat. Thank you.